Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to what has become an ongoing series of discussions with my friend, Dr. Howard Asher. You guys, if you've been following my channel, you know Howard. He's a psychotherapist out of Los Angeles. He also wrote a great book that it kind of gets at the core of the issue that we're going to be discussing today, which is, the reality of Trump Derangement Syndrome. And his book is called A Loose Grip. The information is in the description below. But Howard and I thought it was going to be very important to have a conversation about this, given what happened in Portland over the weekend, given some things that I want to discuss that I've been dealing with my former friends that have had Trump Derangement Syndrome, given what happened with some of my walkaway friends being the targets of a homophobic attack at the hands of Black Lives Matter. We thought it'd be important to do another in this series of discussions. And where we really want to focus in on today is what drives people to these depths of not only wishing, but actually carrying out physical harm against people that they disagree with politically. So, Howard, welcome, and thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, it's a great subject. So we should have at it. Wouldn't it be great that we could have such a on-spot discussion and analysis of this that it could actually make a difference?
Yeah,
and I think you have followers. I'm really impressed with them, and let's see if we can make a difference on this issue.
I totally agree. And I think that this has been probably one of the hardest weeks for me in this election cycle yet. And my fear in this at this point is that it's only going to get worse as we get closer and closer to November. So just to kind of recap where this, I started thinking about this topic on the night of the RNC, frankly, the last night of the RNC. I had a few of my friends, Brandon Strzok and Mikey Harlow and Libby Albert. They're all from the Walkaway campaign that were lucky enough to be invited to the White House to go see Trump's big speech. And they had a fabulous time at the White House. And then as soon as they left, they were walking down the street to go back to their hotel and were attacked by Black Lives Matter activists and were called horrible homophobic slurs and physically attacked. And Brandon described it as, he's experienced attacks for being gay before, but probably not like this in the last 10 years. And, from my perspective, I think we can kind of say at this point that it's bunk that this is a movement about fairness and helping oppressed people, especially when Black Lives Matter activists are literally attacking gay men. What do you think, Howard, is the bigger picture of what's going on with these people that are causing so much chaos in our society right now?
Yeah. The first thing that the takeaway that you get from a situation like this is the very things that they mouth and word as their issues aren't the issues at all. They don't care about gays. They don't care about blacks. They don't care about justice. They don't care about the evolution of good things in a culture. And what they're doing is everything is filtered through the act of violence, which is why it starts off. It sounds like innocent. They say some cause. And a person can say, oh, yes, I agree with that cause. Only about several moments later, they're beating up that person that just said, I agree with that cause. So what's been mixed up in this whole deranged situation, this cycle, the politics of all this, is the causes that are identified aren't really what is being cared about. And so it's the act of violence that is that's the goal. That's the end product. It isn't even violence for a good cause. It's violence for violence sake.
Do you think that they are actually aware of the fact that they don't care about what they express to care about?
What a question. What are they really aware of? It's hard to know because these people don't engage in discussions. I don't even want to presume what they're aware of. In fact, they're not self-aware. This is why I was saying, so you just identified a cause and then you came after a person for whom you're standing as if that's supporting them, but you're coming against them. You know, whether it's a race, whether it's gender, whether it's sexual orientation, it's so, you know, you're saying, well, what are these people thinking? And I think the honest thing is I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're thinking beyond their violence. All I know is their violence. Now, this also comes down to a basic core thing, which is, why are these people doing this? It's because they don't have a moral compass. If they had a moral compass, even if they passionately felt as strong as they do, and they wanted to clock somebody, their moral compass would say, yeah, but no, don't do that. You know, something would go off in their head that says, don't do that. Okay? So you have to have a moral compass that says, even if you have a passion to want to act a certain way, think of all the ways that you act and you keep yourself from doing it because it's wrong. It won't forward the cause anyway. In fact, it'll ruin the cause. It'll go against the cause, which is why the Democrats find themselves in trouble, that is with their candidate, because now Biden is coming out very lukewarm saying this is wrong. Where was he months ago? And the reason he's coming out isn't what, I mean, you can analyze this reasonably and say, is it because of the cause that he's trying to stop violence? Or is it because his polls started to go down and it didn't play well? So he has to come out against this. So the immorality of the violence and the intervention, the political intervention to say we shouldn't do this, isn't even coming from moral reasons. It's coming from political reasons. So the situation doesn't get better. The more it just stays in political, as opposed to what's right and wrong, and what is it that these people really think, which we don't know because their violence stands in the way of what they think. And then I'll go a step farther. It isn't even just the violence, but if you look at any of these rallies that get out of hand, or you know, events, these street events, I'm always amazed that people are shouting at each other. You know, what are they shouting? What is going to get determined and worked out from a better perspective in our society, our policy decisions? How is that going to be worked out by screaming at each other?
And it's not even about it's not even about coming to some sort of common agreement on how to best move forward. I mean, when you were saying that, like, what is shouting solve, I immediately flashed back to last Friday when I was in Chicago doing one of the walkaway rallies, and I was and there was like a march before the rally, and Mikey Harlow and I were late because Mikey took forever in getting ready, but so we had to walk ourselves to the march when he finally got out of his hotel room, and we started to approach where the march was starting, and on one side of the street was all the walkaway people. On the other side of the street were Black Lives Matter protesters shouting at the walkaway people, and the walkaway people were shouting back. And as we were walking up to them, I said to Mikey, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if we just all started chanting Black Lives Matters at the Black Lives Matters protesters? Because no one disagrees on that point.
That's right. That's what exactly, because the content of whatever the issues might be are miles away. In another universe, it's about the violent interaction. The cause is the violence, and that's you know, that's the thing that, from a political perspective, gets mishandled. I mean, it takes a lot of skill to I mean, with a group, with the culture in general, I mean, politics is all about messaging, okay? And the violence prevents the messaging, or it turns the messaging on its head. And so we're losing the grip of what the issues are. We can't resolve the issues because the violence makes it impossible, which plays to another issue. And this is cynical but true, is these issues that these people are espousing that they want fixed, they don't really want them fixed. They just want to have issues. They
Right.
live on having an issue.
I want to come back to that point in a second, but I want to talk about the moral foundations that you said were lacking. And I got to tell you, there was no better indication of that for me than Nancy Pelosi yesterday in San Francisco. Did you hear about this?
Oh yeah,
After,
sure.
like, you know, California is in a crazy state of lockdown. Hair salons are not allowed to operate. What does Nancy do? She calls up a hair salon and goes right in for her haircut and doesn't even wear a mask. And then I heard, though I haven't actually seen this, but someone told me this, that she came out after she was called out on it. And she said, "Oh, I didn't know that wasn't allowed." Nancy, you're the Speaker of the House.
Right, right.
You know what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so, I mean, that issue for me is that's like kind of telling a white lie. And I get that. I mean, we know that none of the politicians are really following their own nonsense when it comes to this. But there was something that was far more severe to me that happened right after I found out that Brandon and Mikey got attacked, and I posted it on my Facebook, where one of my former friends, who has since decided just to be like the absolute worst version of herself and just a horrible human being to me. I mean, she seems to like get off on trying to hurt me at this point. Like she refused to condemn a homophobic attack. And this is a person I have known for 10 years. She used to be a good person. And apparently now that, you know, I am voting for Trump, any moral foundation she had to say homophobic attacks are bad has just gone right out the window. And not only did she refuse to condemn it, but she laughed about it and celebrated it.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, Howard, I was seething with anger, and I wanted to so badly. And I understand that this is petty, but you know, sometimes like what good is like a social media army of people following you sometimes if you aren't going to use it? I wanted so badly to flame her on Twitter. I really did. I wanted to like tag her and say, this person is laughing at my friends being attacked for being gay. I wanted to do it so badly, but I stopped myself before I got there because I knew it wasn't right. It wasn't okay. It wasn't going to lead to anything good. It was just going to create more anger. And I guess I kind of like your thoughts on that whole situation.
Sure. Well, I mean, are you saying that you can identify with, as much as you felt the passion to want to, you know, verbally attack her righteously in the way you thought thing, that you thought twice about it because it wasn't right to do? I mean, what was the reason that you didn't?
I just didn't think. I didn't think it was going to solve anything.
Okay.
It's kind of like a two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, is it like objectively wrong? I guess no. I mean, it's Twitter. Like I get mean comments on Twitter all day, every day. So I guess I don't feel bad from that aspect, but I think it was like, what is the point? What is the goal? What am I trying to accomplish here? And I guess, I mean, this goes back to my moral foundations, where I find it personally offensive that her main goal in life right now seems to be hurting me. And I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be the person whose goal was to hurt someone else.
Okay. Well, and that would be the moral foundation. But then there was the other thing that you mentioned, which I think is really significant, which is, what good would this do? Would this, if I did what I wanted to do, would I accomplish some desired goal? And the answer is probably no. It would just be a food fight.
Right.
So, so I have a philosophy about stuff that comes up that is blatantly problematic for the side that you're arguing with, you know, or have different views with, and the obvious thing is hypocrisy. So, you know, that side lays out some foundation of something righteous and has justice to it, and then when things are played out, the opposite happens. So of course one would question, so how does the foundations of your position work, Nancy Pelosi, when you are telling businesses to shut down, but you want to have a haircut? You know, that, I mean, and it's no small thing. It's the biggest thing that's ever happened economically in your lifetime, in most all of our lifetimes, to actually shut something down. So it's not a simple haircut. So what should be evoked, well, my philosophy is I'm curious. I want to ask questions. I don't want to attack. It sort of comes in the flavor of, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you tell me how you could be a leader, standing by the position to shut things down, such as a normal haircut, and then violate it? What do you tell your constituents? And you can only imagine, I mean, most people are going to want to be defensive. When they take a position, they're going to want to try to explain it. Well, the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightner.
Yeah, Lori Lightfoot.
Lightfoot, okay. She
Yep.
was in the same situation where there were salons were shut down, and she needed to get a haircut. She was called out on it, and she said, "Well, I'm a public official, and I'm on camera a lot." So, and you have to wonder whether they're tone deaf. It's like, well, other people are running businesses, and they have to do Zoom meetings, and they have to look good, or other people are like you, who in their own lives, they're important too. So the question is, how do you square that? And the problem is, to them, it's not even a legitimate question. It's, how dare you ask the question? And this is part of the derangement kind of thing that puts a barrier between, they take a position and then they don't want to be questioned on the position. It's not just a curiosity, it's you've committed a moral treason by even asking that question. So, I mean, do you imagine, well, I don't know, when Nancy saw this news come out, did she slap the side of her face and say, "Oh, Mom, oh gosh, I'm in trouble now"? Or did she say, why does that business have a camera? No one told me there was a camera. There was,
how dare they?
Yeah, how dare they? And I don't know. I don't really know how she responded to herself or to the people who know her. She may have responded both ways. We certainly don't want to get caught in something we have to explain that's indefensible. Okay, and she had to know that was the position she was in. But what also got triggered was she has political enemies, and she would start to have contempt for the political enemies that would want to use that. How dare them do that? And there's a trope that's out there, when the Democrats get caught in something like this that's indefensible, that the Republicans pounce, and pouncing is considered the immoral act, not what they're pouncing about, but just that pouncing in and of itself becomes the offense, not the thing that made the pouncing happen.
That's really interesting. So you're essentially saying that whether or not they're right or wrong, that like whether they're right or wrong is not the issue. It's the fact that they said, "Aha, we got you," and that's what they're trying to paint as the moral offense.
That's right. That's that aha that you caught me is worse than I did it.
And you think they really believe that, or do you think that they're just? I'm asking you to speculate.
Well, here's the thing: it's all they have to go with.
Yeah.
They could either say, "You know what? You're right. I was wrong." And think about what we teach our, morality in our culture is like, don't do wrong things, be polite, treat people decently, all of that. Okay. Now, then life being life, people violate those good rules. Okay. What do we want when people violate them? We want them to say, "Oh my God, I did something I shouldn't have done. I'm sorry." Right? We always say that. We won't see that in the political arena. We always say that if they would just admit their sin, and we could forgive it. And that's a question mark whether we forgive it. Just remember, politics is a blood sport. And if you step out of line just one bit, there is no forgiveness. So that's an argument why somebody could say, don't believe your lying eyes, I never did it. Because once they say, I did do it, and I'm sorry, they're over. Their careers are over. So I guess this is me being sympathetic to why people get defensive about stuff, even in the indefensible. So we've created a situation where we're zero tolerance with everything, which is why you could take like a position that you have today, and then people go to Facebook from years ago and they see that you did something different, and then then you're screwed because they use that against. So I can understand why people can say when they've done something bad and indefensible to say, I didn't do anything bad and indefensible, because they're caught. They don't know what to do. We've not created any space where we could process this with the idea that human beings aren't perfect.
Right.
Which, by the way, that's one of the appeals of Donald Trump. Donald Trump actually came on the political scene as a very flawed person. He didn't hide it. And so, because we demand purity, and Donald Trump said, I'm not pure, but I can get things done. See, what he did was, interestingly enough, he offered an adult way of looking at things. It's like, I won't pose myself as a virtuous person. Heaven knows you know me, but I can offer myself as a person who can get things done. Mm-hmm. And actually, everyone would have left Donald Trump alone if he hadn't won the election. They would, they would have just left him alone and said, well, thank you for trying to be the president. You didn't make it. We love you anyway, and all of that. But he became president, and it threw everybody for a loop. They didn't know what to do with it. So what did they do? They attacked him on the virtue issue. We have a sickness where our positions in the public arena aren't on the issues. They're on who is the most virtuous, who could stand the highest, who could kneel the most, who could be the best in terms of goodness, however you define that. And we don't talk about issues anymore. We just talk about virtue purity.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting you put it like that, because when you kind of started down this whole course, I wrote down, I'm actually taking notes because there are so many questions I want to ask you, but I wrote down purity versus getting things done on my pad. And at the walkaway rallies I've been speaking at, I've oftentimes talked about how this election is not an election between, Democrats versus Republicans. It's not even really about Biden versus Trump. It's an election between, are you comfortable with an authoritarian government, or do you want to make decisions for yourself and about what you can read and think and ideas you consider and all that stuff? And that's how I've been framing it. But I think what you just said is so interesting in terms of they've tried to create this dichotomy between, like, if you're not pure, you're not worthy, pure by the standards that we define it as, you are not worthy to be in public office. And that just, to me, is absolutely crazy. And I don't think that average people feel that way, because everyone knows that we're every single one of us are imperfect. And if we have the expectation of politicians to be perfect, then we're just going to be constantly in a state of disappointment.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten ourselves into a frenzy about it, and we painted ourselves in a corner, because now that we're committed, what's a good way of putting this? I've said this to you before. There's no problem with anyone who has a gut feeling that they don't like Trump. I've never ever tried to get people to either like him or dislike him. There's what's known in the media as a Q factor. They do tests on this kind of stuff. Do you like this person? Do you not like this person? And it's very complicated. But what I've tried to appeal to people is that when you're running public policy, it's not about whether you like the person. It's about whether the public policy suits the best interest for as many people as can be benefited, which is, it's hard to determine, and then there's controversies about that kind of stuff. The other yesterday or the other day, you broadcasted a very good presentation on all of the accomplishments or the things that Trump had done in his term in a very short time. Let me be critical. One of Trump's failings is he's done a really bad job at having the public know on an item by item basis the stuff that he's doing. Not only is he doing it, but he's doing it with one hand tied behind his back while he's fighting off the media and fighting off impeachment. Can you imagine accomplishing all that stuff? And it's hard for me to think that when people say, well, Trump's doing nothing but watching TV and doing Twitter, well, then how did all that stuff get done? Even if he just assigned the right people to take care of whatever, it means that he knew enough how to juggle the balls to get this done, to get this done, and then get this done. Now, here's the other interesting thing about that. If Hillary Clinton had done that stuff, if Barack Obama had done that stuff, the media would be or heralding the wonderful accomplishments. Mm-hmm. But because Trump did them, that's the sin. Anything Trump does has to be called something bad, even when it's good. And I had a discussion with somebody about a week or so ago. It was after the United Arab Emirates and Israel had came to some agreement, and I wasn't following that until I heard it. I got a little bit more details about it, and somebody said, "Well, what has Trump ever done?" And I said, "Well, just the other day, there was this agreement. I mean, to the point where they have phone lines that they didn't have before between Israel and United. I mean, I didn't even know what that all meant. And without knowing more details, I just assumed, this is me, I just assumed that it was a good thing. I assumed that this kind of thing, without knowing all the details, was moving in the right direction. And Saudi Arabia is soon to follow, and the others, and there was an angle as to how it bypassed the Palestine, the PLO, so there are intrigues. I mean, it's probably very fascinating, but it seemed like it was going in the right direction. This is while Trump is fending off all of the criticisms, and he's a racist, and he's a homophobe, and he's all these things, and he's tweeting, and he's doing a major deal like this that hasn't been done for what, 50 60 years? Yeah. It's crazy. So I was asked, so what has he ever done? And in a non-defensive way, I just said, well, I didn't know much about it, but it sounded, that deal he made sounds really good. Immediately they said that wasn't a good deal, and Trump had nothing to do with it.
Okay,
yeah. But that was the knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. Now
here was my response, because I don't argue with people. What I do is I question so that they can help me understand better. That's an approach to avoid debates with people that are useless. Is I may not know everything. Maybe you can help me. So I said to them, well, I didn't know that Trump had nothing to do with it. Was it good that Trump stood out of the way to let it happen? And it made them pause. And it created a bit of a crisis, because they could come close to saying, yeah, maybe if Trump had nothing to do with it, he was still smart enough to stand out of the way to let the forces work themselves out. Yeah, maybe that is a good skill. But I can't say that, because that would be saying something good about Trump, which gets to the bottom line. Trump does something, it's bad, end of subject. Trump will never do anything good.
It's funny that you put it that way, because this is actually an argument I got into with a lot of people around the beginning of the year before the entire pandemic, especially when he did the State of the Union. And, I had not fully kind of come out of the closet as I didn't support Trump at the time, but I kind of thought he was like not the worst guy in the world, and I hadn't fully come out of the closet at that point. And he did the State of the Union, and he was talking about how great the economy was and how great it was that the low unemployment rates for Black Americans, lowest unemployment rate for women, and all this stuff. And I tweeted out that I thought that low unemployment rates were a good thing, and I thought that one of the good things that Trump had done was the economy, that he had created a very robust economy, and that helped everyone. And instantly, what did I hear from a lot of people was, Carlin, that's Obama's economy. Don't you know that that is Obama? And my response to them was, well, I mean, Trump's been in office for 3 years and he hasn't crashed the economy. So does he get some credit for not crashing the economy? And of course, no, the answer is no, because Trump never gets credit for anything. But it reminds me of like what you just explained with the peace deal.
It's really important. I've had that discussion too. And instead of arguing with people about whether it was Obama's economy, which basically I thought that wasn't true. But let's say I concede the point. Okay, you're making the point that it never would have happened without Trump, without Obama. I say, then good. Then Trump took what Obama started and continued it. In other words, the need to have to find Trump as the bad guy and anything he touches cannot be good is the whole point of it. And it could be seen that I imagine this, I imagine you imagine this, I imagine most all of your followers would imagine this, that if Obama had done any of the things that Trump did, even the wall part, even 300 miles of repairing the fence or whatever you want to call it, I believe that people, because Obama would have done it, they would have said that was a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the moral of the story is, if Trump's involved with it, it's bad.
Right. I want to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the more owning or even enacting violence against their political opponents. And I believe that most people in the Democratic Party are absolutely guilty of condoning violence against their political opponents. And a very small fraction of people that probably aren't Democrats, they're probably left-wing extremists and Antifa, are actually engaging in political violence. When we're thinking about when we were talking about Nancy and her haircut, I wondered to myself, did she ever have moral foundations? And they've kind of dissipated over time since she's been in public office for so long. And the reason I asked that is because I think in our last conversation, you recommended to me the documentary on HBO, The Swamp, I believe, with Matt Gaetz. And I watched it that night, and I thought it was a fabulous documentary. But one of the things that was striking to me was, I definitely look at Matt Gaetz in a completely new way after that documentary, because I kind of always thought he was like this bro, and I didn't really have much use for him, to be honest. But seeing that, I definitely came away with the sense that he has a very clear set of moral foundations. And even in the end of that movie, he got up at CPAC, and I remember I was actually there at CPAC when he made this speech and said that he wasn't going to take, I think, lobbyist money anymore, and was the first Republican to come out and say that he wasn't going to take this lobbyist money anymore. And that, to me, is someone that's come to Washington with a very clear set of principles that probably are not always going to help him in his life in public service. But I look at someone like Nancy Pelosi, and I have to imagine that way back in the day when she got into politics, she did it for probably good reasons, but being in Washington so long, and, being that powerful person that gets to go around and basically do whatever you want, I think that gets to people after a while. Would you agree with me that I think people might start from a good place and then quickly descend into a different place?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair for me to say that she started from a bad place and she just built on it. That her only motivation was to have power and, getting elected to Congress and then playing the games inside, and, with the way that games are played for the purpose of winning and then, having all the power. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. She might have started off very pure and very well intended, or she might not have. She might have been the person that just saw Congress as a way of being the boss of people and having and getting her way. I don't know. It's not fair of me to know how she started.
Mhm.
I think but if I give everyone the benefit of the doubt and they get in for reasons because they want to make the community better and they think they have the skill and the perseverance to do it, then they have to, once they're in it, they've got to deal with the infections that they can get from being in a swampy environment.
Mhm.
And, this is where you start to see profiles in courage. This is where you start to see skills. I asked myself, would I be willing to make a deal that wasn't so much on the up and up, but it's no big deal because everyone does it, and in the end, whatever cause I'm going to get will be fulfilled. So that's what matters anyway. Well, you start with rationalizations. I don't know what I would do. I don't know if faced with something, would I hold to a principle, so I can look in the mirror and say that the principle is what matters, or lose the opportunity to enact a public policy that would be terrific. So I think that the people who find themselves in public office have to deal with that. Now, I do believe that there are people who get in it and it's like it's water off of duck's back. They can do anything for the purpose of getting what they want, and they don't care who they step on, and they'll lie to your face about not having stepped on someone when they absolutely destroyed someone. So I mean, there's all kinds of people that get in. When we see a public official running for office, it's very important to be aware of your gut feeling about that person. That is, I like that person. Yes, they exaggerated on such and such, but I could reason that the exaggeration won't be a problem to the big cause. And this is where you've got to be honest with yourself, and it's hard because you might justify something that isn't so on the up and up, but the greater cause wins out, or it's a slippery slope.
Mhm.
Now, I wrote in my book, I said, this is a really interesting thing. Donald Trump, is he a liar? Okay, I'll answer that question for all of us. Yes. Yes. He lies about stuff. Okay.
Conservatives like to fight me on that one. I'm like, no, dude, Trump has his moments. Come on.
Well, I think I'll say something that conservatives will be happy with when I'm done saying it. But basically, yeah, he's a liar. So the thing is, we're talking about Pelosi. Is Pelosi a liar? Well, I'm not going to think too hard. The answer is yes. Okay. So we have two liars. Now let's throw another public official in there. Is so-and-so a liar? The answer is probably going to be yes, 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 yes. So the whole issue of being a liar won't actually be the thing that determines whether I like this person or that person. Because here's the interesting thing. Even though Trump is a liar, he's the most honest politician I've ever seen. Now, how do you square that? Okay. He's transparent. He's unfiltered. He's available like you've never seen. Every day, he's talking with the people. Okay. We know him very well. He's not the kind of person that I think has the ability to even hide anything about who he is, even when he says things that we don't agree with or don't make sense for the situation. But if I was going to make a decision on who's the most honest person in Washington, Donald Trump passes the mustard. Even though I could say without hesitation, does he lie? What he lies about, I tend not to care about, depending. I mean, it will always depend. I don't want to say I never care when a person lies. But we get so much caught up in the weeds like children and we don't think like adults, the grander purpose of public policy, which is why, however much you may think he lies, however much you don't like him, that list that you did the other day, that was a small part of what he did.
Very small part, yeah.
That was a small part. And I even recognize there's some things on there that political opponents say, well, I don't like that one that he did. Okay, fine. But were there 3 others that you did like? Because you're not going to get everything you want with any person who's in that office. You're not going to be 100% satisfied. But what can you get the most of? Who can be the most transparent? Well, Donald Trump has been over 3.5 years now in office. In a short time, he's changed things. He's changed things. I don't even think it's the Republican Party anymore.
No, I said the same, and I said the same thing in that video. I think that Trump has functionally created a third party. It may be called the Republicans, but it bears no resemblance to what the Republican Party was before Trump. It is a completely new political party. And I do think that it is more about, I mean, it's more of a populist party, I would argue. It's more about actually doing stuff and helping people. And I would argue that frankly, the old school Republicans, and I think this is absolutely true of the Democrats as well, are just more representative of the political establishment. Trump is a direct, Trump is the thing that came along to balance the fact that the political establishment had taken over both parties.
Yeah.
And we always need balance. If you do not have balance in life, something is going to show up and give you that balance. And Donald Trump is the thing that showed up.
One of the ironies is I think he fell out more with traditional Republicans than he did with Democrats. Trump used to be a Democrat. Trump could have run as a Democrat. And had he run as a Democrat, many of the Democrats who claim to be against him in terms of his policies, actually, if he had run as a Democrat, they might actually find him very acceptable. Mm-hmm. So he's one of the most remarkable things that's ever happened in the political arena. And I'm really concerned that we don't learn the lessons. You know, we get these caricatures. We spoke about that before. These sort of the black and white way of seeing things, and it's not nuanced enough. And what's exciting is I do think that there are maybe enough people who realize what Trump brought to the political arena. I wrote in my book that those people who claim to be against Trump, are missing an opportunity because Trump is clearing the table politically that makes their ideas more listenable, more if you get rid of the violence, because once you do the violence, you can't hear. You know, there's no issues other than the violence. But what Trump did is his most ardent detractors, the people who hate him the most, don't realize the opportunity that Trump has created for them because he's cleared the table for political discussion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they don't know that.
No, I mean, and can they even? And I think that, I wanna, hit on the violence that's happening that I do believe the Democratic Party are now condoning. And from my perspective, it's one of those things where, I still don't know a lot of times whether or not the perceptions that I had back when I was a Democrat were correct about the Democratic Party. It's one of those things that, and I will probably never know because I don't intend to go back and research every little aspect of the last 20 years of my life. But my perception is that the Democrats weren't always as evil, frankly, as I think that they are now. And I think maybe they went during the 2016 election, but they've really descended into not just condoning violence, but actually supporting it, with Kamala Harris coming out and, saying that we should all donate to funds to bail these rioters out of jail, for that mayor in Portland who, is now apparently moving apartments because Antifa's tried to burn down his apartment and he's moving to another one. But he has condoned those riots for 3 months with my friend, who suddenly, after years of knowing her and have never seen a hateful bone in her body up until the moment she said that it was okay for gay men to be called homophobic slurs and attacked because they were Republican. What do you think, Howard, what triggers a person to descend to that depth where they actually, and I believe they're able to convince themselves that this is okay?
Well, you covered a lot of stuff. So let me see if I can start at what I think is a good beginning point. You said that, use the term Democratic Party being evil. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you putting it that way, but I'd like to, let's say, soften it and say the Democratic Party isn't as much evil as they're asleep. Okay. So this is how that works. Let's just talk about Antifa. Okay. Now, when I first heard or saw and looked at and understood what I thought was going on with Antifa, the leaders of the Democratic Party were saying it didn't exist. There was no Antifa. Okay. So, and the reason, I think, is cynical, because it was inconvenient. They knew it existed, but they couldn't square it inside their party because it's Antifa. It's like it's bad. It's like, they call themselves anti-fascists, and they're like the most fascists that there ever were.
It's completely Orwellian. Yeah,
it's so Orwellian. And so the leaders in the Democratic Party knew that, and what they tried to do is, there's nothing to see here. Okay, they started with that. There's nothing to see here, which, by the way, is a real insult to the electorate.
Yeah,
that's the first step when a party who could be a good party, they're just asleep, but they don't want to go to that messy area, so they say it doesn't exist, and they're telling the people, the electorate, that what you see with your eyes does not exist. Huge insult. Okay. And so they decided to plant that flag, and then from there it won't go well. So what happens is, since it doesn't exist, the evil starts growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. Okay. To where the people who were asleep no longer are running it. It's right. The Antifas that are running it. So I guess what I'm trying to do is, yes, the party is evil because the sleepers let the evils run it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think I missed the thread of your question, though. So, but I want that foundation was really important.
No, I think that's very important, and I'll remind you of the thread of my question in a sec. But I just want to show this quick super chat from Miles, just because it relates to what we're talking about now. Hi, Miles. He says, "I saw your tweet about Brandon and Mikey. I'm finding myself furious with today's left. Do you think there will be backlash?" I think that's a great question, and I think that it depends on what you mean by backlash. Do I think that the right is going to go out and physically attack people if they are unprovoked? No, I don't. I think that they're going to go buy more guns and they're going to talk about, preparing and stuff like that. But I don't think that, I've gone back and forth in my head about whether or not I think there's going to be another civil war in this country. And I'm kind of on the side that right now that I think another civil war has probably already started when we look at it back in retrospect. Yes. But if that's true, it's not going to, the point where violence is already broken out, but where it starts to get really bad, it's not going to be provoked by the right. It's going to be provoked by the left, and the right is going to be responding to it, I believe.
I'll give you my opinion. I actually maybe heard it differently when he said backlash. I didn't see it as like there would be a violent military, confrontation backlash. The way I heard it, and if I'm wrong, he can say more to it, was now that the Dems have let the tent so open that Antifa's running it, the backlash will be the people, what I refer to as the observant, the observant majority are going to go, really? Yeah. No, we're not going to send our right wing warriors out there. We're going to allow Trump to try to convince Wheeler to send in national troops to shut down the violence, and they'll get the approval, the political approval from the electorate. The electorate will say, that's what I meant by, I heard in backlash. It's they've overplayed their card, which is why Biden had to come out with a lukewarm comment about being against violence. Where was he 3 months ago? Where was the Democratic Party? That's the backlash that I think. I'm also not worried about we are in a civil war. We've been in one for quite a while. But I'm not worried that there's going to be a armed civil war. I do believe that people certainly have a right to buy arms that are legal and have them, but I don't think that that's going to lead to one militia against another militia, and that the government's going to stand by and say, go at it, guys. I don't think that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either. I think, but who knows? I mean, honestly, I would not put anything past this particular year. But I mean, let's talk about Ted Wheeler though for a second in Portland, because I think he might be actually a really interesting example of the point that I think I'm trying to get at, which is I'm going to give Ted Wheeler the benefit of the doubt and to say that when he got into politics and when he decided to run to be the mayor of Portland, he had positive intentions and wanted to do good things for people. I'm going to start with that baseline benefit of the doubt. I might be right. I might be wrong. But now we're in a position where Ted Wheeler hates Donald Trump so much that he refuses any offer of help, as the residents in his own city are literally trying to burn down his apartment building. And not just his apartment building, I mean, they're destroying the city, and someone was murdered in cold blood in the middle of the street for being a Trump supporter. And this doesn't seem to bother him at all. What like, Howard, what mental, like, gymnastics, for lack of a better word, do people have to go through to go from a person that says, I'm going to run for public office, which is, for most people is not going to make you $1 million. It's not like, a lucrative profession to get into. I'm going to run for public office because I want to do good for people, to it's okay to shoot people in the street for their political beliefs. How do we go from A to B?
Yeah. Ted Wheeler shot up to the top of the list and it's quite a list of the people I have intellectual contempt for. He's right up there, and I'm sure there'll be other people who vie for that position. There's a lot of competition for that position, but he went right up there. And the reason would be, whatever his motivations are, he's put his city in terrible, terrible danger with no end in sight. When he came out in public to stand with the people that he said he was supporting, they turned against him. They wanted him out, which goes to another principle. When you identify a certain position that you hold as virtuous, and you say, I stand with you, when you go to the mob and say, mob, I agree with what you're doing, the mob doesn't say, good, we got somebody who's with us. They then turn on them because they keep moving the goalposts. You've got to be more and more. I mean, you can't give any more than what he gave to them. So the question is, what goes on in him that he has so much contempt for Trump that he would put his city in jeopardy.
And his own life in jeopardy, and literally the life of his neighbors if they're burning down his apartment building.
Yeah. We talked about what happens in the deranged process when somebody goes all in, and it means that they can't undo. They're going even to the point of their own destruction, because that's actually more desirable to them than, let's say he says, okay, let's bring some federal forces in, and the whole thing stops. There's a curfew. People aren't allowed. They can go online and be protesters and say what they want to say, but the physical violence stops in the streets. Trump would then say, we all know this, he would say, I got in there and I stopped the violence. Ted Wheeler cannot tolerate that. He'd rather die than have Trump claim any victory. And by the way, Trump might even give credit to someone else and say, I'm glad that Ted Wheeler finally allowed me to do this. He might even give away some of the credit as a gentleman, because believe it or not, Trump—
Wouldn't that be funny?
Yes. Thank you for finally letting us do this. But that would still be too much of a win for Trump, because it would humanize him. And Trump is not to be a human. Now, if I had Ted in front of me, Mayor Wheeler, I would ask him, and I'd like to be alone so he doesn't have to be worried what other people would think. I would ask him, what's the end goal here? What is it that you're wanting to accomplish, that you're willing to put the lives of the city in jeopardy as well as your own life? Do you dislike Trump so much that if even Trump got the credit for it, but it helped the situation, which matters most to you? And I won't presume to say how he would answer that. But that also plays to, I guess I want to give tips about where we go from here out.
Yeah.
I want to make some recommendations about trying to have serious discussions about all of this stuff. One of the recommendations is I would not have these discussions in a group. Groups tend to dilute and distract and take a discussion in a different direction. I do think that one-on-one discussions are great. With one-on-one discussions, there's no group pressure to have to come off a certain way. So that when I work with people on communication skills, I don't want to debate with them. I want to understand. If you're coming from a position of not wanting to sell your ideas, but to better understand why somebody else has their ideas, that's where you find a connection to be possible to be made on an issue. And I cannot tell you how many times, if you ask the right question of a person when you're alone with them, if you had this to do or that to do, how would you proceed? It's amazing how much more agreement you'll find over an issue, as opposed to trying to play to a crowd so that you can virtue signal. The problem with the political elite is they're doing too much virtue signaling instead of trying to deal with an issue.
That's very, very, very true. And I have another question I want to build on for that, but I just want to do a quick pause because we've been going for about an hour now. Guys, if you like what we're talking about, if you're enjoying this broadcast, please consider hitting that thumbs up button for us, letting YouTube know you like this stuff, and subscribing to my channel. Howard and I are doing these chats. I mean, we've been pretty consistent about like once a month or once every, 3 or 4 weeks or something like that for a while now, and we have lots of great stuff. So Howard is a regular on this channel if you like his perspective. I also just want to acknowledge this super chat. I'm a huge fan of yours, Carlin. Thank you so much, and I hope you're a fan of Howard as well, because I am a big fan of Howard. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Howard, is like, I think for me, yes, I want to think about how we have conversations with people to try to come to that form of understanding. But I think one of the things for me that I'm struggling with right now is that I hate these people. I do. This is where I'm at, especially with, people close to me that are doing this, people close to me that are wishing physical harm on me for the crime of wearing my MAGA mask in public. I am starting to have such contempt for these people that I don't know if I personally am in a headspace where I want to even have those conversations. And that's a change for me because I've always been about just adult dialogue and rational conversations and agreeing to disagree. But something has shifted in me in the last couple weeks. And maybe it's because I'm busy and I've just been doing these walkaway rallies every weekend and I just don't really have a whole lot of time to myself at this point. But I feel such utter contempt for these people that I feel I am afraid that I am actually starting to dehumanize them. And so I guess I'm asking for your thoughts on how can I bring myself back to get in that place to have this conversation.
All right, let me ask you a question, okay? Because they probably have contempt for you now.
Oh, I'm sure they have for a while.
but here's the thing. Do you think that they're considering whether their contempt shouldn't cause them to dehumanize you? Do you think they're thinking? No. I don't either. So the difference, there's nothing wrong with the contempt that you have for them because they're doing things that are contemptible. And I use the term contempt when we're talking about Ted Wheeler, but I said intellectual contempt. Mm-hmm. And I try to distance myself with the word intellectual so that that was my way of saying I'm sure he's a human being. And, I'm very curious how he got to his place where I think is just utterly problematic for himself as well as he's a public official. So I'm not afraid of the word contempt because it's an honest feeling. And you could make a case pretty well that it's a deserved feeling. If people are acting contemptible, mm-hmm. It would follow that you would have contempt for them. But the thing you did was, I don't want to get to the place where I dehumanize them. And I'm worried about that. Well, it's good on you that you're worried about it because they're not. They had the people who reached that point where they could commit the kind of violence. I'm talking like Antifa type people. Well, it's sociopathic. Sociopathic means that they're incapable of seeing somebody as a human being. That's why, with violence, you take a gun out and you shoot a person, and all you did was shoot a body, but you didn't shoot, a father, a son, a brother. You don't think a husband. You don't think of them as a person, and this is exactly why the political problem has gotten so out of line, is because of the dehumanization that's happened. So the trick will be, can I hold righteous contempt, but still hold out that these people are humans? And it's a good struggle that you find yourself in. Mm-hmm. The moment that you don't care anymore that they're human and therefore you dehumanize them, then you become them. You know how they say that old thing is that you become what you hate?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where there'll be no difference between you and them. Mm-hmm.
And well, no, I mean, it made me think of, I used to, well, I guess I still could when I'm allowed to do training again, but I used to do this exercise when I did my mindfulness training in organizations where, it was to help people kind of wrap their heads around their difficult coworkers, like the most difficult people that they worked with, to try to create better relationships and work with them better. And what I would do is I would put a picture of a woman, like literally in an insane asylum where she looked crazy and she was in a straitjacket. And I would say, if you were talking to this person, how would you speak to them? How would you approach them? Well, you're not going to be aggressive with this person. You're not going to take any insults this person hurls at you seriously. You might approach this person because they're obviously a crazy person that's in great pain right in front of you. You're going to approach this person with maybe a little bit more empathy, maybe a little softer of an approach, maybe a little bit more understanding that they're not in a good place. And if you can imagine that your really difficult coworkers are that person, then that can change the way that you work with them. And very literally they are, because when a person is angry like every single day, and I think this applies to the work environment, I also think this applies to a greater extreme with people like Antifa, when people are constantly living in that angry place all day, every day, and all they do is just look for ways to feed that anger, they are very literally that broken person that you're seeing in that picture. They may not look at it on the outside, but they are that person. And if you can see them that way, that can change the way you work with them.
It's a really good exercise. But so let me tell you how by doing the exercise, it does something that's potentially insulting though. Okay. Yeah, no, it's a good exercise. Don't take that away. The exercise is good. Because this person's in a straitjacket and they don't know any better. And
it's so an extreme version of reality.
Well, I got it. But I'm using the value of this exercise. So now let's take that to somebody who ardently is really extremely against you politically in the derangement arena. Okay. One of the things I've been self-conscious of is while the essence of what I am working with, I can label as they're deranged, so they don't know any better, is also a huge insult. Think about it, right? I mean, you have to say, yeah, I'm gonna treat you with kid gloves because you're too deranged and you don't know it. Now, I pointed out where the term came from. Charles Krauthammer came up with it when he was referring to W. Bush, and he was brilliant in adding this part. He said that derangement is these extreme ways of thinking by otherwise normal people. Okay, so instead of saying they're just not normal people and they're psychologically gone and unhinged in all of their mental capacities, what he identified was these people were normal, but even though they were normal, they had this element of them that was a barrier to other good sensibilities. Okay, if you're deranged, the claim is being made is that you've got a flaw in your sensibilities. Last time you asked me something to the, about Trump, if you thought these bad things about him. And I said to you, you could think those bad things about him without being deranged. It didn't take derangement to say, well, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. But if you are deranged, then it clouds that. Are you saying those bad things because it's coming from the derangement? So this is why there's a stake in people who are deranged to not be deranged. So they could actually say the things will have credibility that it otherwise wouldn't have. So we've got a problem here. If I talk to people and they say all kinds of things they don't like about Trump, and I just knee-jerk react and say they're deranged, I've now ruined my argument about the existence of derangement, right? Because I don't want to be dismissed for ideas I have. What if they just say, well, you're just cracked. I have a derangement on my side. Well, if you have one deranged talking to another deranged, you could just cancel each other by just saying they're all deranged.
Yeah.
So the challenge is, if you identify somebody that meets a criteria that they're deranged, they're not going to accept that. They're not going to accept that they have some mental crack in them that makes them willfully blind to the kinds of things you're trying to get them to see.
Mm-hmm.
So the exercise you talked about is still useful, so that it doesn't matter whether they're deranged or whether they're not deranged. What you do is, there's an issue and you don't agree with their issue. You don't say to them, I don't agree with your issue. What you say is, I need to know more about what you said, because I can't put the pieces together. Can you help me do that?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they say, sounds great. Here's why I think what I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go down that road with them, so that even if they are deranged, they will be identifying either things that back up what they're saying or don't. And I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who demonstrated all the characteristics of derangement, but I asked a few critical questions and they said, actually, you're right. That doesn't count all the time, whatever point they're trying to make. It doesn't always operate that way, which opens up to say, well, could you be wrong about Trump's motivation? And the deranged person, or the otherwise deranged person, says, yeah, I could be wrong. And then I say, so on principles, he might have some good ideas, you just don't like them. And they go, yeah, can't stand them. Do you see where we went?
Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think this is worth putting maybe like a fine point on, because one of the things that really drives me crazy about people on the right is how dismissive they are sometimes of people on the left and their ability to change and to look at reason and to start to see things in a new way. You know, oftentimes I've seen so many instances, and this is especially true on Twitter, and Twitter is not real life, and we need to acknowledge that. But this is just, where I see it happening an awful lot, where, I'll bring up someone that clearly has Trump Derangement Syndrome, and I can identify with that because I had it. I completely understand that experience of it. And to say to someone on the right, well, can we just try to have a conversation with this person? Can we try to, have a dialogue? And they're like, no, they're never going to change. They're never going to see things my way anyway. And so they're kind of doing the same thing to them that the person with derangement is doing to Trump, right?
Yes, this is the tricky thing. When I first identified what was going a long time ago, before anyone was talking about this, I was aware of the dynamics. And I immediately said, how can you address the issue without being dismissive,
Mm-hmm.
and having it turned on you that you're canceling them because you're calling them deranged? It's a very serious problem. Or it's a very serious challenge. And I'm making a case. You see, this is what I'm assuming. I'm sorry to go off point a little bit, okay?
No, it's okay.
I'm really impressed with your followers. It took a little time, but I went through comments made on our various presentations. And you know how it is. I mean, you got a public out there that's looking at that, and you don't know who's going to say about what, know, and there's crazy stuff. And so without knowing, the quality of commentary that would come out, thinking it could be something like Twitter, where anything and everything gets said in the most crazy ways, horribly, that can be said. Guess what? Your group is really sophisticated, very sharp.
You hear that, guys? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not blowing smoke. Okay, in fact, I hesitate to even say this because I'm not trying to ingratiate anybody. Okay, but I went through it in very good detail, and these are really sharp, smart people. Okay, yes. As a group. Okay, and you've got a lot of them. Now, are there crackpots in your group? Of course.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way, and you know who you are, you crackpots. But
maybe they don't know who they are.
Think of the numbers. Well, it's an interesting subject, the crackpot issue. But the point is, you should be very impressed. It's one thing to get followers, and there's going to be people who follow you because they don't like you. That's exactly why they're following you. But you've got the ones that are following you because you bring something to the table. Okay, we're living in interesting times. You know, the curse is being played out in front of us, and we can actually do something. You have enough people who can do this. So this is what I'm getting at. So what I want them to do is to consider that when they do have discussions with people, as much as they're able to, if they want to go there with anybody, do it one-on-one. Those are your best chances if you're wanting to have discussions. Once you get a third person in there, it dilutes and it distracts the direction of where you're going. So that's rule one, is discussions should be one-on-one. Okay, they're better that way. Rule two, don't debate anybody. What you want to do is you want to ask questions on the premise that you missed something. You know, you've got strong ideas, you've researched it, you understand what the values set is, you understand the moralities, you understand the practicalities. You're very good in your opinion, okay? But when you talk to somebody that's got a different perspective, come at it not like you want to win them over to your point. Come at it like you missed something. Can they fill in the gaps? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Just on that alone, is it obvious where that could go? Or
I think it could be. I think where people get confused, and I say this because I've actually taught this technique in coaching classes for like managers and organizations to kind of do the same thing when they're trying to get their employees to do something a certain way. And I say the same thing, you know, ask them questions, make sure you're exploring their thought process, make sure you understand it. I think what trips people up sometimes is, I think that this is not a skill that most people have.
No. I want to underscore something. I do a lot of conflict resolution, mm-hmm. and in whether it's corporate or whether it's marital or you name it. Okay. And what I lay out right in the beginning is I'm going to teach you something that maybe 2% of the world's population actually do. In other words, it's not a skill set that's natural. This is a very unnatural skill set. When somebody says something that is either you disagree with, or you're offended with, or you want to correct, or you want to, it's what I refer to as the undesired message. When you get an undesired message that drops in your lap, what you want to do is you want to attack it, you want to fight it, you want to correct it. You want to push the unwanted, undesired message away. What I teach is the opposite of human nature. You want to invite the message. You want to bring it in. And the way you bring the message in is through questions motivated by genuine curiosity. That means that you don't ask a question that's snarky, like, well, when did you come up with that idea? You ask it like saying, I didn't know that. When did you first think about that? Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm actually curious about those crazy things that I'm hearing, those things that I disagree with. 2%, maybe 2% of the world's population do that. So this is a skill set. Now, taking your followers who are clearly in a class of insightfulness, imagine if they crafted that skill set. From now on, instead of when they hear something they don't like, instead of pushing against it, they say, didn't know about that. Can you tell me more about it? Can you tell me how that works? Are there any weaknesses in your ideas? In other words, there's ways, whatever you might want to say to somebody that is a proactive thing could be asked, it could be made a question. Everything you want to say could be made into a question. Mm-hmm. And you make more of a connection. See, that's the other thing too. I'm sorry. Kind of excuse me. Your goal is not to change anybody's mind. Your goal is to understand. Mm-hmm. That's what communication is all about. Imagine if you're talking with someone, how are they apt to feel about you if they believe more that you're trying to understand them than you are trying to convince them?
Yeah.
Do they feel more positive regard for you, if they feel like you're trying to get them to understand, that you're trying to understand them, or that you're trying to persuade them. So this is an appeal to your listeners to to know what your goal is when you communicate with someone. Your goal is to understand them and to convey that you're trying to understand them because you want to understand them, not to convert them.
Yeah. And I want to just build on that for a second, because people sometimes tell me, because I've said that well, not exactly, but mostly that exact thing to so many people before, and they say, well, Carlin, that just means that they think that I'm going to say that they're right or something like that, and so they have a hard time wrapping their heads around this idea of not trying to convince them. But I want to say this too. There's a very famous management book out there called Five Dysfunctions of a Team. It's by Patrick Lencioni. Anyone who works in any office environment should absolutely read this book. It's a fantastic book. And he talks about getting buy-in in that book. And I think that this is a lesson that can be applied to this as well, because he talks about the fact that in order to get someone else to buy into your idea or your way of thinking or what have you, they don't necessarily need to agree with you. They don't need to agree with what you want to do, but what they do need is to have feel that you have given them the opportunity to be heard, understood, and considered within the context of the discussion. And it's about having that, like giving them that opportunity to feel heard. I think people dramatically underestimate how few people feel like they are genuinely heard by the people they're conversing with on like the average day to day.
Absolutely. This is absolutely key. I don't know if I forget the things we've gone over, but the reason why anybody seeks the help of a psychotherapist or counselor or someone to help them with things, the reason is they feel alienated. They feel on their own by themselves and nobody understands. Imagine if communication makes them feel less alienated. I'm not alone. I have a person who's not agreeing with me, but they care about what I say. That's what the goal is. And so, which plays back to the motivations of people committing violence on the streets. These are people who are alienated, and the only way they can get any connection is to pick up some object and throw it through a window and have a crowd say, right on. In the moment, it's like, and what it is, it's like a cocaine rush. In the moment, they feel, wow, I'm someone important. I'm someone that people like. I'm someone that people care about. And what did it take? It took an act of destruction to, which is, and it's pretty profound. And it says, and it reinforces that they are an important person. This violent act makes me important. And so the reason for the violent act, that is in terms of the stated reason, which is nonsense, like for whatever the public policy that you want to do, or to end racism or something, that's not what's motivating them. What's motivating them is they're trying to not feel alienated.
I think what you just said is really profound, actually. So, I mean, this is about, well, I mean, it's profound, but it also it terrifies me at the same time, Howard, because when we live in it's like this quandary, right? If we live in this era where we have these two sides that are constantly doing this, neither is listening to the other, neither is seeking to understand the other, and both, frankly, I think are acting from a place of alienation and are just unwilling to budge.
Yes.
How do we fix this? I don't even know. I think you freaked me out even
more. So here's the thing. I'm really excited what you just said. Okay. So you use the word profound, which is a profound word. Okay. That means you get it. You connected with what I was sharing with you. You know it in your own work. So I wasn't telling you anything you don't know. I'm not telling you anything that your followers and your listeners don't know. They all know this. Okay. And then I said, only 2% of the world's population do it. If that, right? So that's pretty serious stuff, because if this is what it takes to make this all work better, and we aren't doing it, and there doesn't seem to be anything on the horizon that's making us do it? Well, do you recall the times we've had these broadcasts? I've always made a big deal about what you're doing as important. You got a lot of people. I think that you're going to surpass 100,000 very soon. I know that I know that you're doing this is coming from a place that we don't have to have the bad stuff that we're having. You know, and you never even signed up for this.
No.
No, you were going in a completely other thing that you're doing, and then it bit you, and it bit you hard. And you rose to the occasion, and you used your forum to reach out and say, there's something going on here. I don't know what it is, you know, or I do, or maybe you got an idea, but there's something going on here. And we have two ways of going with this. We could either complain about it, we can give it names, and we can have contempt for it, and we can stand in our righteous intellectual place, right? Because it's very righteous and it's very intellectual. And we can just say, we know things and you should know them too. But we ought to go farther than that. We ought to go, we think we know what we've got here. I do, I've got experience with it, you have it. Yeah. We have a forum here where people are listening. You're going to rallies. You know, those rallies are all about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
They're peaceful rallies, by the way.
They are. We have not had violence at one of them.
And not one of them. So it's obviously possible to bring a lot of people together without screaming at each other. Okay? And it needs to be highlighted. This isn't getting enough play in the media. CNN, that's right. They're part of the problem. But you're sort of you're off Broadway. You're not Broadway, aren't you?
Oh, say that again. Sorry, you broke up for 1 second there.
Oh, yeah. I said you're off Broadway. You're not Broadway. You're off Broadway.
Yeah, I would say that.
You have a following. You have an interested following. It has a groundswell. It's so important. And so this is more than just an intellectual exercise. So imagine the forum is listening to this and saying, you know, this is making a lot of sense. I don't have to just complain about it. That person that I want to have a discussion with, I'll do it one-on-one, and I'm not going to try to convince them of anything. I'm just going to be curious. And by the way, this is no guarantee that there'll be a happy ending. That's the other thing. We have to be realistic about it. But there can be more happy endings this way. There's the promise of more happy endings this way than not. And so maybe there's something inspirational here. And this is what I was trying to lay out before. Whatever your feelings about Donald Trump are, and they could be the worst of the worst feelings ever, there's been an opportunity that's cleared the board to make discussion happen like it never happened before. To not talk about things that are irrelevant. We got to get off of the homophobic, the racist, the xenophobic. You know, those are virtue things. That's virtue pounding. Okay, there are actually issues in there. And there's another phenomenon going on. I mean, it's amazing how all of this is so connected. Politically, the Democratic Party's effort to get Joe Biden into the White House is in a free fall right now.
Yes.
It's in a free fall. Let me point out some things. The polls, the whole polling industry is pretty interesting. And I don't mean that in a good way. Okay? The public polls that you're aware of are not intended to give information about the way people are feeling. They're intended to influence. Those are numbers that go out into the public through the news and through the media, so it gives a false impression as to which way people are going. You and I don't see what's known as the internal polls. The internal polls are the ones that are hired by the campaigns. The campaigns don't want to know what the public polls are showing because the public polls aren't showing what's going on. If I'm running a campaign and I want to win, I want to know what I have to do, and I want to know how bad it is so I can put my efforts into the weaknesses of my campaign so that I can get the people, all that. So what you see happening is that when the violence was going on and the Dems hadn't said anything for 3 months, the internal polling, not the public polls, the internal polling said, Biden, you better get in front of this. He's already behind it, and it's too late. And so he made a move to say something about the violence. Now, there's another element to this whole thing. Do you think that the other side isn't aware of the list that you read off the other day? Do you think the other side doesn't know all the accomplishments?
Of course not. They know. Of course.
Yeah, they know. That's right. They know.
Yeah.
And they know that if that stuff, if Trump if his campaign actually rightfully put that stuff out there, they wouldn't have a chance, a snowball's chance in hell to win the election. So they're in a free fall. Their internal polling is telling them they're on the wrong side of just about everything. So what happens is when you see your opponent winning so handily, even though it's Trump, you don't learn anything, you get mad.
Yeah.
You get mad. And when you get mad, you say, you know what? I'm going to throw the worst thing I possibly can at him because I can't win on the issues, but I can win on this one. Mm-hmm. And they trot out racism. The reason that Trump is called a racist is their last thing to throw at him, which doesn't even matter if it's real or not.
Right.
It's just an incendiary word. It's the worst thing that anyone can be, and you don't have to prove it. And there are plenty of people. In fact, there's too many people who aren't following this anyway, and so they have a caricature version of who Trump is. And if we've put the word racism on top of it, maybe, just maybe, there'll be enough of people who are so asleep, they'll say, well, I'm not voting for him because I'd never vote for a racist.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and that makes me think of the super chat that Deb sent in. I just want to get a couple of these super chats completed, guys, and thank you for your patience. Deb said, John Locke would say we are already in a state of war with them because they've stated their intention to take our liberty and to do us harm. And frankly, when you're calling an entire population of society racist, because it's not just Trump, I mean, they're calling anyone who's ever supported Trump or voted for Trump or isn't voting for Joe Biden, they're all a racist too. That to me is very much trying to do immense harm to individuals and very large groups of people. But I'm also interested, Howard, because we kind of touched on this, and I think this is a very important question that Viking Insane is asking. And how long can the mainstream media keep fooling U.S. citizens? I guess what I want to know is, what role do you think the media has played into this current insanity that we're experiencing?
They're on the front line of it. They're carrying the water. The messaging is how things are done, and messaging goes through the media. Now, I'm glad this came up. I had a discussion with somebody. I was in it was sort of a friend family situation, and we're just sitting and we're talking, and basically I just stay away from the political stuff. The political stuff got raised by a person. Somebody said something, and I sat by and I listened to what was being said. And one person responded by saying, yep, I just can't stand Trump. He's nothing but a bully. He's a misogynist and he's a bully. I can't believe the things he says. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, a lot of people feel that way. This is me now. I said, yeah, a lot of people feel that way. But I'm curious about something because it comes up a lot. would you rather have a person in office who is a wonderful, nice, oratory, friendly, huggable person, who's completely incompetent at getting anything done in the public arena? Ted Wheeler might fit that category. Okay. Or would you want a despicable, horrible, rude, crude and vulgar person, but on policy issues, he gets most all of the ones you care about?
Right.
Okay, so you understand I was asking a thought question.
Yes.
And she paused, which was interesting. Just the pause said, it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. And she said, well, I see your point. I said, well, that wasn't my point. I said, I wasn't making a point. I was just curious. I wasn't there to persuade anybody. I'm absolutely very curious about this. And then she followed up by saying, yeah, but the news, like 97% of the news has said all these things about Trump. And then she followed up and she said, how could they possibly be wrong? This was the news.
Wow.
Yes. And I said, that's really interesting. I said, how could they? It's right, they're the news. How could the news be wrong? And this was said full-throatedly, without, with not the hint of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just the hint of
irony.
Yeah, irony. Yeah, there's the word. How could the news possibly be? How could they all be wrong? Maybe some of them, but how could they all be wrong? And I said, well, that's interesting. What Trump came up with in the beginning, Trump being a good messenger, he came up with a word. And she says, oh, fake news. He said, yes. You understand that whatever you think about Trump, he's in a political fight. So he's going to want to counter the idea that the news says these things about him. What's the best way? He calls them fake, right? So that's his position. And she said, yeah, I understand that. But how could they all be wrong? She said, that was the thing. Maybe some of them, but how could they all be wrong? And I said, well, that's interesting. So I want to know if you go one step further in your consideration. This is a good example of what I was trying to tell everybody before, which is you ask questions.
Right.
I said, it really boggles the mind that they could all be wrong, right? And she says, yeah. I said, but what if they were? And she paused. I said, that will help you understand why there are people who may not like Trump's personality, but they like Trump because they actually do think that the news, or much of it, or enough of it, has got it completely wrong. Completely wrong. And you may not think they got it completely wrong, but what would you say about a person who did think that they got it completely wrong? She said, before we had this discussion, I would have thought they're crazy. But the way you're bringing it up, I don't agree with them, but they could have a point if they figured the news was completely wrong. So this is underscoring what your top chat wrote in and said, do we put this at the feet of the news? Absolutely. The media. They held the water for the other side. And we don't have media other than what you have here. This is media too.
Well, we've got Tucker Carlson. That's about it, though.
Yeah, it isn't like that there aren't voices, but we all know that there's Fox News and there's everyone else.
Yeah.
And so, the ratings for Fox News are pretty astounding compared to the others. So nobody's even watching that stuff, but they have a reputation for being the media in a good way. They have this good kind of reputation. And there are people like the person I was talking to says they can't be all wrong. And so that's how these things start to play out in people's perspectives. And, so if you have those perspectives, it makes perfect sense what has happened unless we could break that down. If we could break that down in the kind of communication that we were talking about, more and more and more people will say, wait a second, there's something wrong with the picture that the media is putting out there. And maybe I don't like Trump in all his ways, but he's got more substantial stuff to say than the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jay Coke says in the chat, and don't think, dude, I haven't been watching you in the chat. You've gotten banned a couple times for being out of line, but you are making a point here I want to emphasize. Okay, now, Dr. Howard, could you have that conversation a million more times with each person? I think what we're suggesting, or Howard, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that every single person here has a responsibility to do what Howard is saying, and to have these one-on-one conversations and to ask these questions. And I think that, Howard and I can't talk to everyone in the world, but there are 625 of you in the chat right now, and I hope all 625 of you have hit the like button. And every single one of you is capable of having these conversations, right, Howard?
Yeah, that's how it. It's a good point. How do you reach a million people? And I don't have a good answer to that. I've always said in the work that I've done, I've been doing this a long time, almost 50 years. And I always approached doing the work I do to be helpful one person at a time. That's how I always looked at my practice. I can't fix the world in one fell swoop, but I can make a connection with one person at a time. And the idea is, because I believe in the butterfly effect, that if I've made an impression on a person in a positive way that's turned their life around, literally, people were suicidal, all kinds of horrible traumatic distresses and stuff like that. And I was able to work with them, and they not only turned their lives around, but they've done amazing things. Mm-hmm. So if all your people talk to just one person, now here's the thing. I'm not suggesting, if in your particular situation there are certain kind of dangers or things that would be too uncomfortable to approach people to have these discussions, don't do them. There's no reason that you have to be a hero about everything. But in the event that you find yourself in a situation and you can talk to somebody, understand what your goal is. It wouldn't be to persuade them. It would be to talk with them one at a time, ask a question. The better the questions, the better the result can be. And if you do that, I have a belief in the butterfly effect. And I think that you not only reach a million people, I think you'll reach a billion people with a B.
Well, I think that that's a very hopeful thought, but no, it's absolutely true. And I think that sometimes people resist doing this sort of thing because they believe that, I'm just one person, I can't make a difference, or they say, oh, my friends aren't going to listen to me anyway, or maybe they try it and, they don't get the impact they want, and their friend, leaves thinking that Trump is awful and they're an awful person for liking him. But you never know what seeds you plant. And I'm continually amazed at people that I talked to, years ago, that I hear from every once in a while saying, I didn't understand what you were saying then because I wasn't ready for it, but I understand it now.
Yes, that's why it's valuable to do. If you approach anything that I'll only do this if it gets the result I want, then don't do it. Don't bother. But if your approach is, in the moment I'm at a situation and I want to have integrity with myself in the situation. Mm-hmm. And that could mean something gets said and you don't need to address it and it's no big deal, or there's an opportunity to address it. And if you do address it, you do with the question that I'm suggesting. And your goal isn't to persuade, it's to understand. If that's your goal, you're good to go. That's all you have to do. Seeds will get planted. If you operate your life that way, it'll make a difference. I cannot tell you how many times I get communications from people who I've seen a long time ago, and just like you, they said, didn't make sense then, but boy, is it right now. I get it. Thank you I never forgot what you said. I always look for moments that I can say something that somebody can tuck into their psyche.
Mm.
And that's what you can do. I mean, everybody who listening to this, that when they say things, another rule, don't pontificate. Say it in one or two sentences. Try to find the simplest way to say a thing. If you go on, and I know maybe even this sounds like a rant, but there's a distinction. If you have somebody's attention, you can go on and on. But people have short attentions. So if you have something to say it in one or two sentences, and say it in such a way that it might make a psychological bookmark for that person, so that if they can't chew on it right now, they can maybe chew on it later, and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. If you want to pontificate, start a YouTube channel. It's a perfect place for pontificating. Howard, I have some questions from my locals community. Do you mind if we take a couple of those?
No, it's good.
All right. This one is from Lyndon Brooke, and it's a little bit long because she pontificated a little bit, but we're going to set up the context, and I think it's a good question. She says, I find myself in a constant state of confusion and exhaustion / overload surrounding my own beliefs about the chaotic state of America because I read something and try to discern the facts and begin to question my own opinions and belief systems. It becomes more confusing because it seems like even the facts now have political spin. What is your thought on the difference between being blissfully ignorant and uninformed in your opinions and not filled with doubt, and being really informed by researching both sides of the issue, but subsequently making yourself more confused and unsure of where you stand because of that research? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was long, and there was a lot in there. So let me try to address it so I can hit the core of it.
Sure.
This is a very critical issue. If you think that discussing the facts with somebody who thinks politically different than you and has an element of passion, let's call it derangement too,
Mm-hmm.
the facts that you're going to tell them aren't going to matter to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's really important. The facts will not get you through a discussion. Okay. Which is disheartening, isn't it? Right? I mean, it seems to me, it's sort of like, well, who won the baseball game? Well, who got the most runs? And then they won it. Well, so you think facts are kind of like that. It's just, who's got the highest score is the one that won the game. It just doesn't work that way. In fact, facts can actually anger the other person. So, let's start off with a core sense of this is what I think and this is what I believe. Okay, whatever it is. I want to vote for this person. I like them. I can trust them enough. I think I'll get the most policies that I care about from this person. Trust your instincts that that's what you're thinking. Okay? You're not backing that up with any facts. I know it sounds as if, like, well, if you got facts, would that make it any better? No, it wouldn't, at least in this part of the discussion, okay? I'm trying to get people, they've got a gut feeling about this person or that person. And I would say this to an anti-Trumper. Okay, you don't like Trump, you don't want to vote for him, he's Mr. Bad, there you go, okay? Mm-hmm. So now if we start off with our gut feeling and that we trust it, we trust the reason, we have a good reason. Even if we can't articulate the reason, let's just trust that there is a good reason in there. So that's our starting point. Now, this is the point where we can bring some facts into it. Can't hurt. I just didn't want to bring it in too soon. I want to bring it in when the fact. So are there any facts that support my sense of this, my feelings? Okay. And let's say you can itemize 3 things. Yeah, he did this, he did this, he did this. Here's a fact that I like to point out with Trump. Did I ever mention it before? But there was a drone attack by Iran, shot down a drone. And this was last year, I think. And Trump was going to, there was a retaliation that could be made where we would bomb some military installation. And at the last minute, Trump asked one of his military, advisors, how many people would lose, you know, when we retaliate. And he said anywhere from 70 to 100. And Trump said, that's too many. Call it off. Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I didn't share that before. I was real impressed with that. What Trump did was he doesn't get any credit for it. Yeah. You didn't know about it. You could look it up. At any rate, obviously Trump was more than willing to go in there to do a retaliatory act, but he weighed it out. Like, guess what? A normal person. Like, guess what? An empathetic person. Like, guess what? You know, a thinking person who just isn't a jerk. Okay. So that's one of the things I point out. The other thing I point out is what he did for Flint, Michigan. He signed some legislation regarding water because there was a horrible thing that happened in Flint.
Yeah, the EPA gave them like $100 million or something.
Yeah, yeah. And then he did some VA stuff. So anyway, let's say you like Trump and it's just your gut and you don't know why. Then you go and you look for some facts, right? So there, I gave you 3 of them. You had what? You had 20 of them the other day. Okay. So here's what's disheartening. You could be a person to say, well, now I want to go talk to a person who doesn't like Trump. And so I'm going to tell them why I like him. And I'm going to tell them these 3 facts. Okay. And the idea would be, oh, I didn't know that about that. Well, maybe I should rethink my thinking about Trump. What will happen to a person who's pretty much hating Trump? They're not going to hear those facts. They're going to either say they're not true, just blatantly not true. You could even say, go on Google, you'll find it. Oh, well, that's not, or they'll minimize them, or they'll put it in some kind of a way so those facts don't have the strength that they otherwise would have. So my point is that facts don't win the day. Even though they ought to, they don't. It's not about the facts. Now, it's not saying that you shouldn't say these facts, but don't expect that the person that if you're trying to convince them, that's why I'm saying don't try to convince them. Just say, look, if you're wanting to understand where I'm coming from, it's because of these facts, and then let those people say, oh, those aren't true. And then so that happened to me. They said, I said those, and the person said, well, those just aren't true. And here was my response. I said, oh, I didn't know that. I was operating that they were true. I'll go check that out. Right?
There you go. Yeah.
I didn't argue whether the person was wrong. You understand.
But sometimes you can play in the land of make believe for a second to enter their world and to try to understand their perspective.
That's exactly it. I said, you know what? If I got it wrong, shame on me. I'll check it out. Thank you for pointing that out. Not only did I consider to out loud that maybe I'm wrong, even though I know I'm not, I thank them for pointing it out. That's what I'm trying to promote in terms of it will have an effect. It'll be hard to do. It's not natural, goes against human nature. It sounds anti-intellectual. That's the way to handle it.
Well, I kind of had a different read on the question. I think everything you said was awesome, and so I was kind of wanting to see where you were going with it. I think I had a little bit of a different read on her question, which was I think what she's trying to get at is more of like a personal perspective. Like, are we as a society all victims of analysis paralysis when we're taking in too much information and then we kind of can't make sense of it? Do you think that's going on, Howard?
Yes, I do. That's why, and thank you for pointing out the question, but here's why I think I did answer it. And
okay.
It's like we are a victim of what she's saying, but I want you to start off with your just gut feeling about what you think is going on. You can engage in the analysis, but your core is that gut thing that you have. There's a good chance that you're right, and that's all that matters, that to yourself, that is. Okay, that you live in a real chaotic, all of us live in a crazy world. This is a crazy world. Okay, I said that the number one reason people have issues is alienation. So this is your form of alienation. Well, how do you get that corrected inside your own psyche? The way you get it is you honor your own sense of what things are, because that's all you've got. You honor it. If there are people that you trust in your life, you could check your ideas out with them. You could say, I was thinking this and this. What do you think about it? And they may give you additional perspective. So in other words, it may start off with bad news, but the news is good. The news is good is that your gut sensibility, if they're being done honestly without severe rationalization, that's a starting point, and you may even end there even after you've done your analysis. Does that
Awesome.
make
No,
sense?
it makes complete sense. Thank you for the clarification. I have another question here from James. And he says, derangement is definitely palatable with Trump, but what about COVID derangement? For example, I know people who I can show all of the CDC reports and study that shows we may have already hit herd immunity, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to do anything that's going to get me banned off YouTube by saying things they don't want me to say. And they still make excuses and act like it's morally just to do everything the government dictates, and anyone who doesn't follow suit is morally reprehensible and radical. Do you think there's COVID derangement, Howard?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just in the same way as the other derangements we're talking about. It's funny, I just heard about that. The CDD came out with a breakdown. I don't want to say it out loud either for the same reasons, because I understood that Twitter censored it.
Twitter is censoring it. Facebook is censoring it. I actually did a video about it the other day, looking just purely at the CDC website. That was the only thing I showed. And it seems to be okay. And it's actually monetized and everything. So I don't think YouTube is coming down as harshly on this content. But yeah, Facebook is definitely censoring it. And Twitter is definitely censoring it.
Right. So, I mean, what could be worse than the idea that, I don't know, I'm thinking of Copernicus. I'm just thinking if Copernicus was around during Facebook and I mean, if they had social media during Galileo's time and Copernicus's time, they couldn't talk about the celestial bodies. You know, yeah. I mean, you can see where I'm going with this. My God, Twitter, what's the end game here? Are we to be dummied down to the point, like, where do you think innovation comes from? It comes from ideas, even the wacky ones, even the and here's the other thing, let us decide what's wacky. Okay. Yes. I want to hear every crazy idea there is, because I know that throughout history, there's been some nuggets in those crazy ideas, but now I don't have access to them. I'm the choice of what's wacky, not you.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I think that part of where we get to the good ideas is by debating the bad ideas. And so how can we ever be sure that we're really getting to the good ideas, or even like the outside of the box ideas that might be just exactly what we needed, like a Donald Trump presidency, for example? Like, we can never get there if we aren't even allowed to consider them.
We can't. And the challenge is, are there enough of us? The other side thinks there isn't, or thinks that we're too scared to speak up, and some of that's true, or that we're too asleep. Okay, whatever the if is, the other side is banking on that. Here, this is what the Democratic goal is to get Biden in the office. They did it into the White House. They did it with Hillary. He has a stack of chips that if he doesn't lose too many, he'll get in. That's not a winning campaign move. I mean, we called it prevent. He's playing prevent defense right now. Mm-hmm. It's like, don't make any move right now, because we just want to get you in, and hopefully you won't lose too many chips, and everything's fine. This has been the campaign goal for I don't know how long back. It's like it's an insult to the electorate. I'm banking on the electorate being too stupid and too asleep. If we are too stupid and too asleep, you've heard this before, we get the government we deserve. Mm. I mean, I believe that. If there's enough of us can be observant to see what's going on, and it's not hard to see. That's the other thing. All you have to do is open your eyes. It's not that hard, but you won't see it clearly if you make Trump the boogeyman. Even if Trump were a boogeyman, you still won't see clearly. Mm-hmm. And so the appeal is, let's not worry about whether he's a boogeyman. Let's just worry about what is. let's deal with what we can see and what we know. And the other side, whatever, how you want to put it, is hoping and banking that you won't see enough of it.
Right. Crazy, crazy. Well, we've got a couple of other super chats. I kind of feel like we've already answered some of these, but I want to make sure I acknowledge them. I can't pull them up on my screen because that's just the way the program works, but I logged them. Brandon says, love the content. What ends up halting this derangement? I kind of feel like we've already talked about that, but do you have more thoughts about that, Howard?
It's a good question. You said something. I'm glad you asked this question, even though it's in line with all the other ones, okay?
Yes.
Because it's a little sliver of the same idea. What will halt it is what we're doing, okay? I've already mentioned the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect, should I just assume everyone knows what that means?
Probably not. Let's give a brief overview.
Okay, this basically, it's a butterfly effect that the slightest thing in the world can have an effect on the other side of the world. And so when a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, I'm trying to think. So in maybe Canada, somebody is able to they close a real estate deal. Okay. Now, what one has to do with the other? Well, that would be all the intervening things that would happen that are an infinite amount of things. Okay. Now that would make people feel like what I do doesn't matter. Okay. I mean, nothing more alienating than the idea that you're just a nothing and what you do doesn't matter. But the philosophical idea is that, yes, it does matter, okay? You're a butterfly, and when you flap your wings, you're going to do something that allows someone to close a real estate deal that will benefit a whole bunch of people, okay? You have to believe in things like that. So that's the first thing that I would pose, is if you can believe in things like that. If you can believe in things in that, the derangement stops with this. This is a power against the derangement. If enough people wake up from that, they'll say, tell me more. And now, instead of talking about racism and xenophobia and homophobia and distractive nonsense and hypocrisies and I'm trying to think of other things, conspiracies. We're actually talking about things that actually matter. If you don't believe that, you're not going to buy into what I just said. But here's the thing, you're already watching this. So there's something about you that wants to get filled up with things that are positive, that make a difference in your life and the people you care about. There's something that already exists, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this. Now, can you expand that a little further? I believe it. I'd like to see it in my own lifetime. Good luck, but I'd like to see it in my own lifetime, that derangement comes to an end because of this.
Here's hoping. And our last super chat is from Baka Bushy, and I think this is actually a great way to end it. He says, great discussion, doctors. Very important to empathize and not dehumanize. The moment a person becomes the other is when possibility of dialogue is lost.
That's it. I mean, is it a he or she or who? Anyway,
I think it's a he.
Well, anyway, I didn't get in trouble. It doesn't matter. That person ended this whole thing correctly.
Excellent. Well, Howard, we've hit the 2-hour mark, and anything past 2 hours tends to go downhill very, very, very quickly. But I want to thank you for coming on for another awesome discussion. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Well, let's see. Where can they find me? I have a website that I don't visit very much. It's where my book. So, boy, you caught me. They can. Gosh, I don't know. What's the best way to get me?
I think probably. I think your book website is probably a good place to start. So, is that a loose script book? It's in the description below, guys. I don't remember it off the top of my head.
I'm sorry. I feel a little lame. There are people who got me through LinkedIn, and I've responded to that. Actually, there's a lot of people who've contacted me through LinkedIn, and once I've contacted these people, I let them have my my email address. Cool. So if people want to contact me, I'm sorry to make it difficult, but if they go through LinkedIn, I can get in touch with them, and then it can go more fluidly.
Awesome. And Howard is on Twitter. He is at Dr. Howard Asher. I don't think you use Twitter that much, but you are there, so you can follow him on Twitter if you like as well.
I forgot that too. I need to get more proficient with the social media accessibility. But yes, I do have a Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on the channel, guys. And again, I believe I've linked Howard's website in the description below. I strongly recommend his book, A Loose Grip. I think it's really, really fabulous. And thank you again, Howard, for helping us to kind of break down some of the stuff that's going on. And I'm sure I will have you back soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Be well.
All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And guys, just so you know, I will probably be doing another kind of impromptu live stream tomorrow evening or like late afternoon, evening with Mikey Harlow. We're just going to chit chat and gossip and, and promote the walkaway rally that's going to be happening in Dallas on Saturday. If any of you are in the greater Dallas Fort Worth area, I expect you to come out for the walkaway rally. I will be there. I'm coming down on Friday. Mikey and I are going to go shopping for a cowboy hat or other cowboy paraphernalia. And then Saturday, we're going to have our merch and our rally. Information is on walkawaycampaign.com. And yeah, I will see you guys soon. Have a great rest of your day.